As you're probably all aware, there has been a string of quote-unquote retirements on YouTube recently from the likes of Tom Scott, Matt Pat, and Meat Canyon, and other people that I want to pretend that I'm a day one fan of. But considering that this is more topical than a steroid, I figured I'd take the opportunity to talk about YouTube retirements in general, which seem to be completely different from the regular concept of a retirement. The concept of a retirement that we currently hold goes something along the lines of this. You work for 40 years until you're like 60 or so, and then you kind of quit cold turkey, never really to set foot in your old career ever again. And then you kind of just start to enjoy your life, whether it be making new hobbies or going traveling or whatever. The concept of quitting on YouTube seems to differ in a pretty considerable way. See, the one thing that you'll probably notice about all these announcement videos that have been popping up as of recent is that everyone who's stepping away isn't stepping away entirely, but rather just transitioning their content into something a little bit more manageable. To better illustrate this point, I feel like it might be useful to imagine like a bell curve, right? Where the y-axis is money and relevance and the x-axis is time. So when you first start making YouTube videos, you're just doing it as a hobby. So there's kind of no need for money or relevance because, you know, it's not a business. But then as soon as your channel starts to grow, it then becomes a business and you grind out to keep on the algorithm and to make your living. But then once you've made your living, you've lived out your peak, it kind of goes back to the same point on the bell curve and you kind of start to treat it like a hobby again. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of big YouTubers finally reach that point. This process is what I would describe as more akin to a soft retirement, where instead of just cold turkey quitting, instead they're just changing the kind or maybe the pace of the content in which they produce. And this right here is what differs a lot from a traditional retirement. And it's a lot to do with the fact that YouTube is just one of those things that gives you a lot of freedom in terms of your career path and allows you to do whatever you want on your own terms. I think although we can all agree that this is probably what's going on, I also feel like a lot of people are drawing the wrong conclusions from this information, specifically attributing a lot of this to burnout, which I feel like is fairly misguided. And the reason that I think this is because burnout is a spectrum. On one extreme, you have people who simply just cannot deal with the situation that they're in right now and completely change career paths. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who worked hard for some amount of time and just need a few days off. Now, this is in no way scientific or proven, but I feel like the number one common thing in terms of a response to burnout is some kind of break from work. And the way that I see it, a soft retirement takes a lot more consideration and thought than just realizing that you're burnt out and that you need a break. And for that reason, I just kind of can't see it being a response to any level of burnout. So yeah, while burnout might be a small contributing factor, I feel like a more accurate statement is that these people simply just want to pursue more of what they originally fell in love with. Maybe I'm just cherry picking what I remember, but there seems to be this blind misconception that people are always just going to love doing what you love watching. And if there wasn't this perceived external force like stress or burnout, then they just continue to do what they've always done. And again, maybe I'm cherry picking, but I always seem to see a lot of comments along the lines of you've worked really hard to this point and you deserve a break, which always seems to have an undertone of denial from the audience as if at some point things will just go back to normal. But let's be real with ourselves here. These people are never going to go back to producing the kind of content that they're known for. And it's not because they're burnt out, and it's not because they, I don't know, hate the content that they were making before, right? It's just because they made a considered decision to shift their priorities and make a creative hobby out of YouTube again. I think a good example of this playing out, a lot like how all these other retirements are going to play out, is PewDiePie. And if I remember correctly, he announced his retirement and a lot of people just assumed he would drop off the face of the earth. But what really ended up happening is he was just more intentional with the content that he did produce because he was able to start treating it like a hobby again. And what's kind of funny is that there's still this online debate as to whether PewDiePie is actually retired. I think the moral of the story is that people move on with their lives, and these people are just fortunate enough to love what they do so much that retirement to them is just doing what they were already doing before, but in a way that will just get them less views. And yeah, it might suck to hear and you might not want to believe it, but these people aren't making a change because they're forced to. They're making a change because they're finally able to have a hobby again. Kind of sounds like a good life lesson, to be honest. If you like, I don't know, painting, then you should go paint. And then when you retire, keep painting because you like painting. Anyway, at the end of the day, it's kind of sad that we might not see the retirees in the same capacity again. But I'm not going to dwell on it too much because it kind of just means more viewers for me. So yeah, have a good day. Hope it's very good. Retiree merch coming soon. Okay, bye.